This is a bombshell. If this New York Times story is true, that the Deputy Attorney General actually secretly recorded conversations with the President of the United States and actually discussed with other members of the cabinet the possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment to the Constitution to get rid of the President because he felt that there was chaos going on. What are you hearing over there, Jim?
Wolf, I just went into the office of the Deputy Press Secretary, Hogan Gidley here, who is essentially minding the fort when it comes to dealing with the press. The Press Secretary, Sarah Sanders, is with the President right now on this trip. He was in Las Vegas last night for a rally. He's in Missouri in just the next hour or so to talk about veterans issues. He's at a VA hospital there. And we're expecting to hear some comments from him shortly, Wolf. It would be extraordinary if the President were to weigh in immediately in all of this. I can tell you that Hogan Gidley said that for right now the White House has no comment. He seemed to be reading the article on his desktop computer just as we were all reading the article on our phones. These are very explosive allegations and details, Wolf. Obviously, if the man who is overseeing the Mueller probe felt a year ago that the President should be removed from office using something as drastic and dramatic as the 25th Amendment. That is obviously, Wolf, I can just tell you right now without even talking to people who are supportive of the President, they are going to say, and I expect these kinds of comments to come in the next hours or perhaps the next couple of days, people are going to say that Rod Rosenstein should be tossed out over something like this, and it's obviously going to fuel the theories that go on inside the President's mind. He's very prone to believing conspiracy theories, and so are some of his supporters, that there was some kind of coup, deep state plot to remove him from office. And my guess is, Wolf, if the President doesn't make that comment at the speech coming up shortly, he's going to be tweeting about it in short order. This is obviously something that the President has been very fearful of and has talked about from time to time. He feels that there's some kind of conspiracy against him. Obviously, the Deputy Attorney General may have had valid reasons for all of this. We don't know all the details in terms of what was going on, but there is, I can't think of anything more extraordinary in terms of a government official seeking to have the President removed from office in this kind of fashion. It is just not something we're accustomed to seeing come out in a news report in this era. It just goes to the very dramatic, almost breakneck, pace of just unbelievable developments that happen here at the White House on a regular basis. But this just may be the most extraordinary thing I've seen in a very long time, Wolf.
Yeah,
we definitely need more details about it.
And if the New York Times report is true, it's not just the discussion of invoking the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, where you have a majority of the cabinet recommending to the House of Representatives and the Senate that this president must go, but it's also the fact that, according to the New York Times, there was a secret recording of a conversation, that Rosenstein had a secret recording. That, I'm sure if the President believes that to be true, that's a fireable offense. Evan Perez, you cover the Justice Department for us. This is all very explosive.
Well, it is explosive. I mean, let's just back up a little bit here. There actually wasn't nobody is actually saying that there was a recording, according to the Times and the people that they spoke to. Even Rosenstein is now saying that this was a joke, that there was nothing ever suggested, something that they would do.
Well, let me reread the lead of the New York Times. The Deputy Attorney General, Rod J. Rosenstein, suggested last year that he secretly recorded President Trump in the White House to expose the chaos.
According to the Times, they never actually went through with it, but just the thought that they even discussed it, Wolf, and discussed it with having other people, FBI people who were going to meet with the President to actually carry out such a recording is an extraordinary thing to have actually happened. The idea that this was discussed, but what this puts the President is in a very difficult position, because now this is according to accounts that Andy McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI, who President Trump has called a liar, has called a leaker, has assailed repeatedly, in his tweets. This is now, the President is going to have to decide whether he believes Andy McCabe or whether he believes Rod Rosenstein. And if you remember, going back to right after the firing of James Comey, Rod Rosenstein was in a very tough place. His memo that he had written was being used by the president to explain why he fired James Comey. And so Rod was certainly very distraught. He thought that he was being used, set up. Certainly that this memo was not his intention for it to be used this way. And so he was very upset. He was telling friends, and he was basically, telling people, a lot of people, how he felt. And so I think that's the context in which these conversations were happening. We don't know exactly what Rod was sort of thinking necessarily about actually doing any of these things, but according to the Times, they didn't actually go through with any of this. They didn't actually go through with any discussions. According to Rod Rosenstein, didn't actually go through with any discussions of a 25th Amendment coup, as you described. But certainly, I think this now puts the president in a place where he has to decide, do I believe Rod Rosenstein's denials? Do I believe Andy McCabe, who was fired for allegedly leaking and for lying?
You can decide it that way, that it's up to the president here, but this is all now with the special counsel. And the other thing is, we talk a lot about this, certainly legally. It's what's in someone's state of mind. What was going on in Rod Rosenstein's mind at the time where he felt that this was kind of necessary? This would have been an extraordinary move to go ahead, going to the White House, whether it would be Andrew McCabe, whether it would be another FBI official, whether it would be Rod Rosenstein that would wear a wire and record the president in any kind of conversation. Why did Rod Rosenstein feel that that was something that perhaps was necessary? And I think that's what we all need to understand here, too, is what was going on. And, the Department of Justice or sources there could be saying, well, he was just joking at the time. Well, I think this article kind of lays out that he wasn't joking, because someone asked him, if you're to believe this story, are you serious? And he said, yeah, I'm serious. So something was going on. Yes, this was about 2 weeks into Rod Rosenstein's time when he started working at the Department of Justice as the deputy attorney.
And it was full chaos.
It's full chaos. Something was going on, and it was like, so if Andrew McCabe can't do it, maybe someone else does it. So Rod wanted something. There was something going on, and now the fact that also Andrew McCabe then went ahead and wrote this memo about it. Again, we've seen memos before. James Comey, other Department of Justice officials, other people at the FBI who've written memos. So certainly extraordinary. This now all is with the special counsel. What are they doing with all of this information?
And Gloria is with us as well. Gloria, let me read the second paragraph in this New York Times article, and just remind our viewers, Rosenstein was only 2 weeks on the job when all of this was unfolding. Mr. Rosenstein made these suggestions, supposedly about recording the president secretly and invoking the 25th Amendment. He made these suggestions in the spring of 2017 when Mr. Trump's firing of James B. Comey as FBI director plunged the White House into turmoil. Over the ensuing days, the president divulged classified intelligence to Russians in the Oval Office, and revelations emerged that Mr. Trump had asked Mr. Comey to pledge loyalty and end an investigation of a senior aide. That sets the stage for this bombshell report.
Right. Look, first of all, Rosenstein was thrust into this incredibly turbulent situation. We know from our own reporting that he was telling his friends that he had tracks all over his back because he writes this memo the president asked him to write about James Comey. Clearly, he was not a fan of the way Comey handled the Hillary Clinton email situation during the election. He writes it, and then suddenly he discovers that the president is using it to validate his decision, or as the explainer for his decision to fire Comey. So that's why he felt like he had tracks all over his back, because he felt like he had been used. So he was upset about that. And maybe he had been used by Jeff Sessions as well. Who knows? But it was clearly he felt used. The piece also points out that so there was turmoil from Comey, but at the same time, he was sitting in on the interviews that the president was having to replace the FBI director. And maybe, and the Times piece kind of implies this, that this gave him another view into how much the president knew or did not know about the way the FBI should operate. And we know this over the last year, that the president has one view of how the FBI should operate, that is, as his own personal general counsel, versus the constitutional view of how the FBI should operate, which is as an independent institution. And so, you know, maybe at this point, Rosenstein, his head is exploding, right? He's been used. He's sitting in on this. He believes the president is not competent to pick an FBI director. He's not the kind of guy to joke about wearing a wire, would you think? I mean, you know him. I don't.
He's a former U.S. attorney.
Yeah, but
in
he's
Baltimore.
a serious guy.
I've known Rod Rosenstein probably for close to 10 years.
He's a very serious guy.
Very serious man.
Very experienced in law enforcement. And this notion, Laura Coates, you're a legal analyst, of invoking the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. Basically, there are two ways to forcibly remove a president from office. The impeachment process through the House of Representatives and then the Senate, but also the 25th Amendment to the Constitution if a president is deemed by the cabinet, a majority of the cabinet, as being inept, unqualified to be president of the United States.
Right, and to suggest both, I mean, impeachment is really a serious thing to invoke, let alone the 25th Amendment that came shortly after the assassination of Kennedy. I mean, you're not talking about a time that is used lightly to invoke the 25th Amendment. But also remember that Rod Rosenstein is particularly vulnerable. There's been questions looming throughout his entire tenure as the deputy AG, who is essentially the role of Jeff Sessions, who the president has just now said this week he has no attorney general because he does not believe that he has loyalty in the office or somebody who is focused on issues that he wants to put forth. And so Rod Rosenstein already has this complex relationship as the person who is overseeing the special counsel probe. He is the person who is the gatekeeper and the ultimate decider of whether or not there are indictments that are pursued, that there are going to be grand jury operations that take place. He will receive the report from Robert Mueller and have the wherewithal to turn it over to Congress or not. He is in a very, very key position. And remember, around this time, they've been wondering, people from Roger Stone's assistants in the past to the advocacy of Rudy Giuliani, has talked about the notion that Rod Rosenstein is not given sufficient oversight over Mueller's investigation, and that renders the entire thing a witch hunt. So the timing of this is very important to think of the legal context of why he was already vulnerable. Now you add this to the pile of witch hunt fodder, and you may have a roasting.
You know, Evan, I want to read the so-called denial, the formal statement that Rod Rosenstein put out, because I've covered a lot of so-called denials, non-denial denials. This is very carefully written. This is, and let's go through it. We'll put it up on the screen one more time. This is Rosenstein's reaction to the New York Times story. The New York Times story is inaccurate and factually incorrect. I will not further comment on a story based on anonymous sources who are obviously biased against the department and are advancing their own personal agenda. But let me be clear about this. Based on my personal dealings with the president, there is no basis to invoke the 25th Amendment. So that doesn't sound like a firm denial. I never recorded anything. I never even raised the possibility of the 25th Amendment. This is what they often call a non-denial denial.
It is, and look, I mean, Rod is a very good lawyer, and he's definitely written a lawyerly answer, and it's really the only answer he can give. But I will say this. I mean, I think if you contrast, I think these comments allegedly were made, and certainly Andy McCabe and others who witnessed them, they heard these in a certain context. Again, these were the opening days of Rod Rosenstein's tenure as the Deputy Attorney General. You fast forward since then, and from what I'm told, Rod Rosenstein and the President have a decent working relationship, certainly better than Jeff Sessions has with the President. So I think what Rod is getting at there is that his interaction with the President since then, he's certainly come to think that he has a better working relationship with the President. The President seems to appreciate him, certainly thinks that he's substantive and has good interactions with him, certainly better interactions than he has with Jeff Sessions. So that's where I think the latter part of that statement, which says, you know, based on my interactions with him, I don't see any reason for the 25th Amendment. That's what he's getting at there. But it doesn't address exactly what you're saying, which is he doesn't address that he may have made those comments, again, in the opening weeks of his tenure, that he may have suggested that he recorded, other people should record the President, and certainly didn't, you know, that he may have suggested this, this 25th Amendment.
And don't forget, the President has also tweeted a lot about Rod Rosenstein.
Not lately.
That has stopped. Yeah, exactly. That has stopped because now he's so focused on Jeff Sessions. And don't forget, in terms of the Russia investigation, it is Rod Rosenstein. This is another complicating factor. It is Rod Rosenstein who has to make a lot of important decisions, such as if the special counsel Mueller goes to Rod Rosenstein and says, I need to subpoena Donald Trump to testify. Rod Rosenstein, correct me if I'm wrong,
you're right,
has to sign off on this.
And don't forget,
Not just Donald Trump, any witness, anytime you want to
anyone,
go
right.
forward.
But
so
especially that.
Rod
He has
Rosenstein
enormous
is key,
power.
but whether the president, should or should not be subpoenaed to testify is such a key thing.
But keep in mind also, remember, the other part we're forgetting is that they've raised, people certainly in the president's camp have raised the issue that Rod Rosenstein is a witness. And how is it that he's in charge of this investigation when he is a key witness who witnessed some of these very big moments at the beginning of this?
The story is clearly going to deeply anger the president of the United States. I suspect there will be some
just at the
significant
White House
follow-up.
yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And he was just there
so there's going to be a lot
yesterday,
of. And if you remember, if you watched the president's political rally in Las Vegas last night, as I did, there was one moment where he paused and he just said the Justice Department,
right?
And there were boos, and he was really railing
an extraordinary
against.
moment.
I mean, this was a moment when you see the president of the United States slamming the Justice Department.
He's actually invoking
in front of thousands of people at a political rally. You have to wonder what is going on.
But this story will only confirm his suspicion about the deep state.
But he's very consistent about not liking anonymous sources. Rod Rosenstein has talked about this in previous press conferences before, about not wanting to rely on that, which is also the party line of the president with respect to the op-ed recently published. He knows where his bread is buttered.